the beautiful place of a very rich 500 years old history, a place that is a meeting place, but also a source of inspiration. This is something I'm convinced that is true, with over 400 events per year and an extensive international exchange and collaboration. And today this panel with greatest experts I could ever imagine, will be focused on one of many important aspects, yet the aspect that is crucial for the whole day in Villa Decius. Why is that? Because this is the day of the final day for the project that brought together partners from 4 countries, and it's a prolongation, continuation of the already ongoing collaboration dedicated to enhancing capacity of cultural project managers, culture practitioners, that has in its center the ideas and values important for us, like, for example, freedom of artistic expression and the role of artists and cultural practitioners, not only in terms of cultural field, but largely speaking, their role in the democratic discourse and the role in the changing political, social, also climate environment. My name is Dominika Kasprowicz. I'm the director of the Villa Decius, and it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you and also our friends and audience that is joining us online. Here in Villa Decius today with me are experts, acting directors, CEOs, people who actually have great expertise and insight into various fields of culture. So let me start with thanking to you all for accepting the invitation and with a very, very short introduction. We start with Frédéric Jacquemin, the director of the Marcel Hittner Foundation, based in Brussels, but active in many fields and in many countries. What it's also very crucial from our perspective is a deep insight we have been given to the African affairs by our colleagues and the foundation itself. It's also, the foundation is a leader in the field of extracurricular educational activities, like the European Diploma Program in Cultural Project Management, project that has been there in the field for 30 years and gave a unique opportunity to people interested in developing their individual skills in really scaling up their careers, but mostly their international cultural projects. So thank you for being with us, and first of all, thank you for leadership of the project we are concluding today. The second on my right, Ms. Olga Brzezińska, Deputy Director of the Adam Mickiewicz Institute, also an expert in the field of culture, a researcher, and a person that has overview, and not only overview, probably a handful full of details when it comes to the Polish cultural presence, Polish cultural agenda that is happening just now under the umbrella of the Polish presidency in the European Council. So welcome, Olga. Thank you for coming over through Warsaw, from Brussels, Krakow, you know, the best destination, so we were very happy that you could make it for the day, for the panel. I also want to welcome Madam Katarzyna Piotrowska, who is a Deputy Director of the Municipal, so City of Krakow, Department for Culture and National Heritage, a person also with a vast experience in international collaboration, mostly dedicated to tangible and intangible heritage, but these days also reaching out far away, for far more than just that. Madam Director, thank you for being with us. The Deputy Rector of the Jagiellonian University, Professor Jarosław Górniak, who is responsible for the international affairs. Universities are supposed to be internationalized, and it's a great privilege to have a chance to hear from you, sir, about the role the universities play or could play in this field of quite demanding international exchange when it comes to cultural projects management. What is also important is that at the table today we have representatives of the theater sector, one of the most creative, as I believe, sectors of culture and creative sector. With us is Bartosz Szydłowski, beating heart and the driving force behind many projects, many debates, many social and artistic initiatives, just to name the first and I think the most known, so the Boska Komedia, the Divine Comedy Theatre Festival. I would say one of the best export products definitively of the city of Krakow, if not for Poland. Of Poland. Here we go, of the region to the world. Thank you, Bartosz, for being with us. I really appreciate that. We do also have colleagues coming from other parts of Europe. Professor Luis Bonet, representing the University of Barcelona, an experienced pedagogue, but also an expert in the field of cultural management. Your creativity throughout the years I witnessed, it's really impressive. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for being a part of this consortium that made the project itself possible. Northern Macedonia, a country that we have plenty in common, with a beautiful heritage and a lot of potential, represented by the former Minister of Culture, and a person that also belongs to the consortium, Robert Ala Giozowski, today representing Gotham Publishing, expert also in the field of European Capitals of Culture initiatives. Robert, thank you for being with us today. On my left-hand side, at the end of the table, Ms. Agata Grabowiecka, the CEO, the director of the cultural institution, actually orchestra, a beautiful Sinfonietta Cracovia, that I believe translates the saying that culture is really a process that goes above any borders. Your vast experience in initiating international collaborations over the everyday activities of the orchestra is really impressive, so we are looking forward to hear from you, and thank you for joining us to the panel. Last but not least, the director of the institution that is very unique and also very efficient in enhancing capacity of individuals and institutions. This is the Małopolska Region Institute for Culture, an institution that works under the auspices of the region of Małopolska, so south of Poland, and that is responsible for an overarching processes, advocacy, assistance, but also initiation of several new amendments, arrivals, solutions. And by chance, our great neighbor when it comes to the nearest proximity of Villa Decius. Tomasz, welcome, great to have you. You will all have a minute for adding things that are important and I haven't talked about. So I would love to hear how many local regional institutions you have under your umbrella, supervising, advising, and looking after, because it's really a big number. Okay, so that would be the introductory part, and let's get to the business. Let's get to the table with the three modules, three topics. I thought that could be quite interesting for us, for sure, but also to the wider audience. Why actually we gathered here today in Villa Decius? The leitmotif of the day is international collaboration in the cultural sector. On one hand, this is an obvious, if not trivial, statement. People who are deeply immersed in the creative sectors, in everyday management of cultural projects, I believe would not distance themselves from international exchange and various types of internationalizations. But when you look under the surface, you would see many challenges, many unanswered questions, and also quite a big potential that not yet been used, in spite of the fact that Poland, Krakow city, over 20, almost 25 years after becoming the European capital of culture, is being recognized as the city of open gates and quite internationally recognized. When it comes to Poland, we also have some lessons to be learned still when it comes to internationalization of these cultural processes and internationalization of cultural institutions, I believe. And this is also a question whether it fits somehow, anyhow, into the general central agenda of the cultural policy of the country. There are many more interesting samples and topics, so I had quite a hard time to pick up just a few to fit into hour and a half we have all together today. So let me start with the first module, and let's make great use of the expertise of the people at the table. So the question is, at first glance, quite simple. So where are we? What is the diagnosis of the international collaboration in cultural sector Anno Domini 2025? Do we have anything to show off with? Is there anything that can serve a kind of benchmark in terms of excellence, innovation, impact? Where the Poland-based cultural sector currently actually stands? Olga, as agreed, the floor is yours. The initial interventions should last not longer than 5 minutes. I hope we will manage to follow this drill more or less.
That is more than a challenge. Such a big question where we are at. But the simplest answer that I can give, and I will elaborate on, is that we're both at the very miraculous end of history and also a very challenging one. Because if the times are bleak, then still we have to enjoy what we got as a result of all the political changes that happened in 2023 with the elections that were won, I would love to say, by the people for the democratic coalition. And then what happened in Poland, a lot of changes followed in the arts and cultural sector. So we have new leadership in many institutions at the national and municipal and regional levels, which is a long-awaited change, and that gives me hope because I can see that I'm not only part of the change, I'm also observing this change, so I'm positioning myself both on the dance floor and on the balcony to be able to maintain some perspective on what's happening. So that would be the national perspective, but also I said that this is a wonderful time for Poland because starting January 1st, we assumed the presidency in the Council of the European Union, and Adam Mickiewicz Institute is responsible for the International Culture Program of the Polish presidency, and that gave us a chance to speak loud and give the floor to artists, and it's not only the stakeholders and policymakers and agents who are active in that field, but actually we, as a relational, not transactional institution, we made space for artists to collaborate and to present what they do better than us. And why I'm saying also that it is a challenging time, because what we're observing, what's happening around us in the region, in Europe, but also in the wider world, is worrying. And sometimes I hear the word scary, because especially the last few weeks have been scary for many an artist and manager and person working in a non-governmental organization, because what's happening in the United States is also impacting on us. So the picture is really diverse, and it's really difficult to maneuver with all these stimuli coming at you. But we're trying to do the best job possible in the given circumstances, and that Polish presidency is giving us a chance to be not only visible, but also to convey a very powerful message. And the message goes beyond we're back in Europe, we're back at the European table to negotiate and agree and imagine common future with our European partners. And I mean European, not only EU partners, because it was a very conscious decision for the Adam Mickiewicz Institute and the Ministry of Culture, who is our supervisor, to include in the program also the candidate countries. So it's a solidarity thing that we're paving the way for those who want to follow us 20 years after. The powerful message that goes beyond we're back is also we have something to say. Then it is about the arts and artists, and about building relationships, lasting relationships in Europe and beyond, because we want to finish with the paradigm of hyper-instrumentalizing culture, seeing it as a product or as a resource for achieving external goals. We do believe it is a reservoir for values, but also a very potent place where people can meet and get curious about one another, and that is the ultimate goal. Bring people together so they want to talk to one another rather than shoot at each other.
Olga, thank you very much. It's a very powerful, elevated speech, introductory. I hope we will get back to some of the motives of the topics you mentioned, because they are of utmost importance and very interesting in the everyday practice of the director of the small institution having great ambitions. Let me get to Bartosz Szydłowski, director of the Łaźnianowa Theatre and the Divine Comedy Festival. What is your take on where we stand when it comes to culture and international exchange?
I have two perspectives here. One is more pessimistic, the other is more optimistic. Well, for sure, I believe, and this is what I believe in Polish society and Polish artists, and in this energy that we have here in this part of Europe, and that it has great value. But this culture should be listened to. And yes, we've been part of the EU for the past 21 years, and the countries from the other to the other side, they have been treated as objects. So I see this restricting number of cultural projects. There are fewer and fewer artists who wish to talk to one another. Let me give you an example. In the 1990s, when it comes to collaboration with Germany, we collaborated a lot among theaters, art galleries, and so on. And then this collaboration stopped, and we haven't seen any revival of this collaboration. What is even more alarming is that over the past 30 years, we've seen less will to collaborate, and there are more and more political parties who want to focus on emotions of people. And now the measure of value is the emotions that stay with people after they've seen a performance, after they've seen a piece of art, and so on. And this is the key to our failure, why we are in this paradigm of the Vienna Congress, where the arrangement of powers is the way it was and nothing has changed. Why the constellation of European Union hasn't taken into account that it has to change, that it has to change its priorities and prospects, because new stars have emerged in this constellation. They have disrupted the environment. It is already different, and we can't speak about Europe from this Franco-centrist or German-centrist perspective. No, we need to get a new opening and mix all these subjects so that we speak about Europe also from the Polish perspective. And this may be quite interesting for the French, for example. Now, lack of courage, intellectual laziness, and political technocratism they don't help us. We have a lot of red tape, and the visions, the ideas are not spread. So yes, I do believe in this great potential. And when I meet people, yes, we see that things do grow and flourish. And yes, the Divine Comedy Theatre Festival is the festival with which we try to make people meet and make them leave with some good sentiments. So this is this magical formula of theatre operation. This way we create conditions for this meeting with emotions and for building trust, because it means that someone will become interested in us and we will become interested in others. So when I think about collaboration, I also always think about generosity, because if I'm generous, it means that I think not only about this relationship with a partner, but I think about the partner themselves. I'm interested in their opinions, in what they can bring about. And I never push my own communication. Well, of course, when you think about politics, it's a bit different. But here we're talking about this lower level, when we wish to implement certain ideas. So that's all when it comes to my introduction. Thank you, Bartosz, very much.
Just to remind all of you that when we finish this short session of interventions, there's a space for comments and questions. So take your notes, focus on what you find most interesting. And before we go to the second round, we will have a chance to deepen some of the motives and topics that are already on the table. So thank you very much, Bartosz. Let's move to the other side of the table and to the perspective from the other side of the continent. Professor Luis Bonet, director of the Cultural Management Program at the University of Barcelona. Luis, what would be your take, seeing from perspective, where are we now when it comes to international relations, collaboration in cultural sector?
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's great to be here and sharing this panel, because I think it's really very important at this very moment. I totally agree with Olga when she said that we are in a crucial moment, and we need, as well as you said, that to need to change. Now, there is not time to continue doing what we used to do. So I will talk from the role of universities, which is my own position. So as you probably know, universities, we have mainly three main missions. The traditional ones, teaching, research, but as well knowledge transfer. But understanding knowledge transfer, as a double flow circulation, because we learn from the expertise, from the professionals, and we give back to them our approach, our methods in order to promote critical thinking, which is a little bit our mission. So from these three different levels, what we try to do in the field of international cultural cooperation is, for one hand, do research, and do research on this, and I have been participating in several Horizon projects doing research on cultural diplomacy, in the relationship between, one of the projects was between Latin America and the Caribbean and the European Union in the field of cultural cooperation. I just finished a research commanded by IFA, which is a German body, on the ASEAN countries, so southeastern countries and European countries in the field of cultural cooperation. So this is part of our job, but at the same time, this idea of pushing our PhD students to focus on this topic from their own point of view, because we receive students from many parts of the world, and that is very useful, because when you have a Chinese doing research on the topic, when you have a Mexican doing research on this topic, or when you have a European doing research of this topic, the context, the parting approach is different, and it's very interesting what they can share together when they try to see if their hypotheses are or not influenced by their own context. So this is, I think, something that we could do as universities in this field. But at the same time, I think we also have the responsibility to change our way of teaching. And I think the CCProm project is a very great experience that is pushing us to change, first of all, to exchange with others what are the real needs. So the university doesn't have to work isolated, but we need to work with the professionals, with institutions, with the artists, with the cultural institutions, because this is the only way to really serve our society, not to be in this very comfortable space that sometimes academics we are. No, we write our papers for very expensive journals that nobody reads except us. So that's one of the problems that we have to try to break. I think that this idea of how we change our teaching, how we change our way to support not only the current students, but in a long life learning approach, which is also something that also sometimes the university has some problems to understand, that the learning is something that will be all around our life, because things change so fast. So that means we have to change ourselves. Because if we don't change, if we don't accept the challenges, we are not improving what is our task. No? So, and that's why I think that's the key issue. And in my research, in my work on international cultural relations, and particularly in cultural diplomacy from one side, but also in cooperation, because I think the word cooperation is a word that we have to use much more, because cooperation means exchanging, committing, deciding together, listening to the other side. That's something which is totally different when we only understand the instrumental approach of cultural diplomacy. So in the hands of soft power. I know that at this very moment we have to defend soft power, because hard power is crazy. It's really crazy how it's used at this very moment. But I'm not saying that soft power is not needed. It is needed. It's very important. But we also need to support cultural cooperation, which means a much more decentralized approach, giving to everyone the right to do things with the other. And that's something that could be, of course, supported by public resources, but finally depends on our own responsibility. Without our responsibility, without our capacity to push the powers in this direction, we won't probably be able to do that. So that's, I think, is our responsibility as a university, to push critical thinking, to push this openness in understanding and trying to work with others.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Luis. We got a sneak peek into another subsection of the cultural management environment or ecosystem that is university. We'll get back there to the details of what universities or educational institutions can do, could do, should not do anymore in a minute. But before we go there, I would like to ask Frederic about his opinion and his assessment as to where we are when it comes to international collaboration, because your collaborations go far beyond Europe.
Thank you, Dominika. Thank you for having me here. And I join Luis and I guess also Robert in the warmest expression of gratitude for being invited here. Yes, the Fondation Marcel Richter is based in Brussels. We're an extremely small organization, but we have a rather wide scope of activity. And I will, if you allow me, take this opportunity to give you some news from outside Europe, because I've been quite extensively traveling mostly in sub-Saharan Africa for the past 15 years, I would say. And the last year has seen that the image and the reputation of European Union and European in general has degraded drastically. I've seen a lot of Belgian flags burned in Congo, in Rwanda and Burundi. I've seen quite a few French flags burned in Cameroon, in Burkina Faso, in Dakar. But lately, it's the first time that I see European flags being burned. And for me, it's a huge marker of something that is totally shifting. And I was there recently, and I don't see familiar faces anymore. I don't see French operators. I don't see Western operators. I see Turkish, I see Korean, I see Russian operators in the field of cultural cooperation and cooperation in general in Africa. So I think that now it's really the time for European and mostly European cultural manager to stop looking inward. Because we spent, I think, quite a lot of time and resource looking at ourselves and making a bit some kind of blindfold of what was going outside. And I think we are paying the price right now of this isolation and Eurocentric approach. And for that, I'm just not making an observation. I think there's ways to go out of this shelf and to be more in contact with what is happening in the world. Because I had the pleasure to meet Professor Gorniak, and in the few words that we exchanged, I learned that here in Krakow, something like 50 plus different nationalities are being actively present in the making, the social fabric of Krakow. Brussels is 100 plus. So Europe is really a chaudron, a cauldron for the new world that is being cooked. So when it comes to cooperation, how does it translate? I think that more and more searchers and practitioners are considering culture now not as something like specific to what we call in genius loci, as something very specific to one population or one political or social system, but something which should be considered as a common good. Just as water is, just as the air that we breathe is, culture should be considered in the future making of cultural policy as something that we share in common. And there are many gatherings about this idea of considering culture as a common good and services. And when it comes to cooperation, that changed quite a lot, because it's not only about me making my small, project with European or like-minded European. Like-minded European could be people living and operating elsewhere than Europe, by the way. But it's really putting up some project that really encompass the global nature of culture as a common good that we have to manage in common and to consider not as something that is endless, but something that is limited in time. When it comes to cooperation, it's also, for me, rings this idea of inequality and inequity in the terms of cultural exchanges. when you look at the exchange of goods and services worldwide, you can clearly see that there are oligopoly structure in the exchanges of creative goods, that fair competition is a myth, total myth, and that access to fair competition when it comes to culture and creativity needs to be totally reinforced. I'm just taking one example. I was lately in DRC, where now there is these atrocities happening in the east of Congo. I was in Kinshasa, and I met someone from the center region of Congo in Kisangani. And Kisangani is a city of 2-3 million inhabitants, and is the capital of a region that, say, have 4 or 5 million inhabitants. And he was the director of the only cultural center of this region. And for people to have access to the theater, they have to take maybe 2-3 buses. It's a real project to go and to have access to the theater. And I was just reflecting on my personal experience, where I live in Brussels, and by 5 minutes walk, I have access to 2 different music academy, one French-speaking, one Flemish-speaking, because we are in Belgium, one library, one cinema, one community center, and there's something, and a visual arts academy. All that for free, or almost for free. So there's a clear and sheer inequality, and I think it's our duty now to compensate this inequality. Otherwise, we'll have problems in the near future. When it comes to cooperation, it's also raising the question of sustainability. Cooperation development is about sustainability. So how do we strike a balance between the consumption and production of culture more and more through these devices and sustainability? There was also a myth saying that culture was endless, that it was clean energy, and that was a factor of peace. I would stand for culture as a factor of peace. I would stand for some kind of endless creativity, but for sure, this is not as sustainable as we thought it was. So we need to reflect and implement projects in that sense. But I would say that we have to reverse engineer our matrix in order to make culture something that is more future-proof than it is today. Last thing, and then I will stop because there's so much more to say, but for me there is one striking point that is in front of us, and it's the revision of the UN agenda for 2030, where there's big debates and big question, and there I think that European Union representatives and the politicians, they have really a unique historical opportunity to make a difference, is to adopt one specific objective for culture. And friends, they are artists, they are saying, but it won't change anything because, you know, it's bureaucratic decision. For sure, it is a bureaucratic decision to include one objective dedicated to culture, but it will shift totally the perspective because it will be the problem of the bureaucrat and not the problem of artists. Concretely, without this on their list of agenda, the bureaucrats say, you know, it's not my problem if I don't do anything for supporting the local culture. If they have that as part of their roadmap, then they will have to scratch their head and to find good cultural manager and good cultural program to make their boss happy. And I think that's where we're kicking as cultural manager, cultural operator, and cultural training institution, because we have to think ahead and prepare ourselves in the hopefully valid hypothesis that will be an objective for culture, and how we can make good programs that will fit all the criteria that will be, you know, in the table to be selected. That's my 5.
Thank you so much for that. As you see, instead of getting into the details, for good reasons, we are exploring and expanding the perspective, and it's not yet over, because the last speaker of this part of this module of our debate is Agata Grabowiecka, director of the Sinfonietta Cracovia, so a slightly different angle, but yet very well and very much embedded into the international environment. Agata, the floor is yours.
Tak, ja powiem zupełnie co innego.
I'll say something absolutely different from what I have prepared. This is the level to which I've been inspired by the addresses in this panel. I can observe a change in the quality of international cooperation. I'm a practitioner, so let me step down from the level of ideas and concepts to actions and specific projects. I am the director of a municipal orchestra. I've been one for 3 years. Before, for 14 years, I worked in a municipal institution, Kraków Festival Office, KBF, who organized and co-organized the largest festivals in the city with an international panache. These were the golden days when we could attract the best ensembles in contemporary music, for example, from different countries. Now these funds are almost gone. We see this tendency throughout Europe. There are smaller funds for culture, so the cooperation we managed to strike in those days now bear fruition in an entirely different system of cooperation. Both Sinfonietta, which used to come here as a whole, now exchanges musicians. We have a leader from London Sinfonietta. They together interpret modern music, and then we have a concert which results from that. And I believe that this gives us far stronger understanding that we must treat one another at par, that it's worthwhile to create shared projects. It's not only cost optimization, but it also makes it possible for those projects to go round Europe and also reach the US. We've also been there. The Adam Mickiewicz Institute no longer has to pay, as in the bygone days, for us to pay Polish music, but we co-organize various things. We don't have to pay commercially for renting a room in Belgium because we're invited there, because Polish artists, Kraków artists are appreciated, and the level of those artists is also very high. That's something that is paid attention to. There is no looking down upon us. As partners, we work at equal footing, and we know that the projects that need to have some message are there. Sinfonietta Cracovia is one of few Polish orchestras that do not play any Russian music. Europe has changed its mind. A controversial issue, I'm not going to dwell upon it now, but it is a very important message that we share. I also believe that the world of classical music is one of the most conservative sectors in culture. And there I feel this need to change the narrative. It is not something that is there for the elites. That is something that is a quality experience of music for all people, of music being an international language. And it is so important to communicate culture and music in the context of well-being and mental health, because that is a profound problem, not only in Poland. And then experiencing music live, theater live, helps to maintain this mental hygiene. And I believe that it is also important for us to communicate music like that. Thank you very much for that very thought-provoking contribution that shows this magic subject of sustainability, survival of project effects of international exchange in a bit different light. Now, not being an orchestra director, one can be inspired in long term by what you said. We finished the round of the so-called statements. Now I hope to receive comments from you, also comments from the room. Those will come at the end of a session, so later. So only questions here at the table to one another, perhaps comments to one another here at the table. Too many subjects have been tackled to focus, but I believe that Louis has something to say. Yes, Louis?
Just a couple of comments because I think are important. Bastos talked about generosity, and I totally agree. Generosity has long-term impact. But as Frederick said as well, we have to think about sustainability. So who are the ones who can support long-term investment in order to have long-term impact. That's something we have to think, because that applies to the founders, the ones who are giving. So if we only give 1 year project fund, that doesn't allow us to have this long-term impact and this investment that we need to have, because in international relations, things don't happen next day. Things have impact in the long term. So that's something I wanted to say. And the second comment is to Frederick in relation to the development agenda of 2030. I think I agree with you that even though most of us could see this as a very bureaucratic approach, but in this very moment, it's important to have legitimacy, mainly social legitimacy, because next years will be quite hard in terms of budget allocation. We are pushed to invest more money in defense. We are pushed to change our priorities and our welfare state system in Europe. So the weakest sector is culture. So we need, in order to be legitimized and to say how that could bring to society, that this is one of the key objectives of development of United Nations. So I think we have to battle. It's a crucial battle.
Thank you very much, Luis. Tomasz?
Thank you for the invitation. I'm yet to speak, so probably I just don't want to spoil what I'm going to say. But yes, there is a battle about the funding, but I don't think that culture is yet at the moment the weakest link. Yesterday, Ms. Brzezińska was also, I think, present yesterday at Brussels, and the day before there was meeting with the Commissioner for intergenerational agreement, youth, culture and sport. And I think culture kind of got a little bit of a success in the last 2 days when there was a huge discussion how we can increase the allocation in the next MFF for culture. And actually it was noted that culture appeared at the moment in political discussions at the European Union level, but education disappeared. But that's only a comment. I will tell you a little bit more in a minute. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel I need to commend the meeting that you're mentioning was the conference of Culture Action Europe and European Culture Foundation. European think tanks gathered in Brussels to discuss how we can push forward the agenda for the multi-annual financial framework for the years 2028-2034. And I feel like, I feel backlashes because this is the same discussion that keeps coming back. It's a recurring discussion that we as the culture sector tend to emphasize how important culture sector is for the future of Europe. And there is a total mismatch with politicians who expect more concrete and usually short-term results that the culture sector doesn't see its role in, because a culture sector sees its role in promoting critical thought and discussion and in-depth, just going deeper, which requires time. And the thing that really was, it was also ambivalent, because there was a good thing that we had politicians attend the conference and 4 hours straight listen to, culture sector and managers and actually doers, people who are very deep in action, not only in thinking and discussing. And at the same time, what I found really worrying was that the culture sector doesn't have a story that is compelling to policymakers. because we keep repeating culture is about values, culture is about bringing people together, and this is all true, but it doesn't translate. It is as if we were speaking two different languages, and our role is to find a story that is compelling, not only to people in the culture sector, but also to people who are rarely taking advantage of the culture sector, people who, but also to people who have decision-making powers. So this always brings me back to the noble speech of Olga Tokarczuk, who said that the story has the power, and we don't have the story. That's why we're the most powerless sector when it comes to all areas of policy.
Więcej
More spending on armament because there was
od wielu lat uważam, że niedoinwestowanie kultury i niewiara w jej sprawczość po prostu doprowadziła do takiego stanu w świecie, w jakim w tej chwili żyjemy. Ale jest jedno niebezpieczeństwo zawsze pojawiające się, właśnie ta kwestia
one
narracyjnych.
danger that comes back. So
W pewnym momencie zaczęliśmy się
at some point, we started explaining ourselves why culture was needed. Well, culture is needed to move towards the unknown and not just the known. And it has become just measured by sustainability development or whether it has increased GDP or employment and so on. It has lost this fundamental power. We have yielded to it, thinking that we, cultural managers, cultural directors, could win over the technocrats. But you can't do it because they have no imagination. They have been formatted in some way, and they only understand Excel sheets and certain channels. And this is how the world is, what it is like. And, this is where the problem lies. So now we really need to look into the mirror and think about individual talents and powers and not the systemic ones. I'm saying it in front of all those people here gathered who are responsible for culture. This is going to be put on our shoulders. We are the hope. We need to believe in it. We can't be pushed into this channel that the change is the sole value. No, it's not always that change is valuable. And culture gives freedom, and we need to bear this in mind. Culture is there to make us curious about the world, to make us ask questions, but it shouldn't give us answers. We need to find answers. If culture is the carrier of political agendas, well, that's why it has lost its credibility. Very many people have, very many members of society have not identified themselves with certain agendas, and they became indifferent. And then they got caught up by some more emotional talk. So these are some mechanisms that are cynically used by politicians. So yes, I want to speak about this micro scale here in the context of macro scale. And it is important for politicians to understand that this micro scale, that this individual involvement of people is the basic driver of the entire sector. Thank you very much, Bartosz. Katarzyna Piotrowska, please. I became really thoughtful about what you have said, and I wanted to withdraw from taking the floor, but okay. let me say the following. We have, in a way, started believing that culture is weak, and we judge culture from the perspective of money and, you know, the share of the budget that it gets. But maybe we should think about culture as a language, because in Europe we communicate through this language of culture. We speak this language and no other one. Maybe if we take a look from a different perspective, maybe this way we could also find common language with those who have other values and other agendas. If you allow me, I'm going to finish this round of statements with a short comment sparked by two messages here: investment in armament and weakness of culture. Well, it is because of tragic reasons that in this part of Europe, also politicians have become aware of the fact that current military operations include this component of cultural war, waged with elements of culture, including pop culture. So if we give up on culture, the results will be really long-term. And I believe that politicians should understand this, because this is related to our security. Yes, I'm talking about this cultural war that is being waged by Belarus dissidents who fight for their language and for their nation, which is being Russified, and also for the fight for this tangible and non-tangible culture that Ukraine's been fighting for. So we have this space to say out loud that culture and that culture should also have this dimension. And now let me move on smoothly to the second session, to the second module. It is equally interesting. We've had here very interesting statements speaking about cultural policy, cultural management, cultural practices in the macro scale. But now let's move on to a different area, and that's why let me now ask Ms. Katarzyna Piotrowska, Mr. Tomasz Włodarski, and Minister Robert Alagiozowski to take the floor. And I've asked them to think about other perspectives of international courts of culture, maybe the perspective of towns, villages, smaller regions, and also the countries that are pending and waiting. My apologies to the interpreters for switching from English to Polish and from Polish to English. I'd like to use this occasion to thank our interpreters. We have Mr. Piotr Krasnowolski and Ms. Ksumena Plater-Zyberg. Madam Director, what's the perspective of open royal city of Kraków, the city of culture? Okay, this question is a true challenge. I'm speaking from the perspective of cultural department that I have the pleasure to represent and to work in it. Currently, well, we have undergone changes in the municipality following the elections. The new mayor of Kraków was elected. And we also need to think about international cooperation from the perspective of our municipality. So yes, this collaboration is carried out by cultural institutions that are not directly connected with our municipality. And of course, in your cultural institutions, there is red tape, but believe me, in our municipality, there is even more of it. So this is definitely an obstacle. But the city, the municipality, is the place where there are different ideas for international collaboration, cultural collaboration. And we do it via our diplomatic channels, but also through our personal direct contacts. And also our city enters into collaboration with other cities. We carry common projects, or we are part of some networks. And as I've said at the beginning, currently we are at this point where we think whether the program of cultural development will be continued, or maybe it should be reviewed, or maybe a brand new strategy should be written down. And whether there should be even more of international and European collaboration as part of it, and whether the state cultural institutions, municipal cultural institutions should be responsible for it, or maybe independent institutions or these grassroots initiatives should be more responsible for this cultural cooperation. Because we want also local communities to become more involved. Now, I hope that today's discussion will also translate to the future directions of our collaboration and how we will think about future cultural international cooperation. Thank you very much. I must admit that this is not for the first time in our history that we are part of the momentum. So yes, thank you very much for this very precious comment. We will definitely speak about the city as an area that is source of potential, but also that can be a source of some limitations on international cooperation. We will definitely think about this very complex ecosystem. Now let me give the floor to Director Tomasz Włodarski.
Invitation. I'm also being invited and asked by organizer, but also from my regional authorities to represent the position of the region. And in the region we have 25 bigger cultural institutions like music halls, opera, theaters, recognized theaters, and also Małopolskie Institute of Culture, which is our institute, which is slightly different from the others because we are more or less professional development center for culture centers. Not only those big ones, but also we take care of the municipal culture centers, because maybe not all of you are aware that actually our system has those national, regional, and municipal level cultural institutions. So we, from this regional point of view, try to support not only the big regional institutions, but also the smaller ones. But as it comes to the international cooperation, so I'm aware that our region and the big cultural institutions are very much engaged in cultural exchange for the dissemination of culture of Małopolska region, but also to invite recognized artists. I mean, so they can perform in Kraków and in Małopolska. But the smaller ones, they have no such capacity. It's less possible for them. For them, it's more or less the European Union programs, for example, to join and to use them for professional development of the employees. So we can somehow, we as MIC, we can recommend them where to go, to which region, for example, because we have partners across the Europe. So they come to us and we can advise them on that. But for what MIC does, the international cooperation, and first of all, I think is the testing. It allows us to be less dependent on the very rigid rules of our funding, public funding, coming from our region. And then, for example, we can write an innovative project with European partners, test some methodologies of working in culture education or art education, for example, for a year or two, talk about that with our international colleagues, and then promote it in the region. I mean promote because this cooperation with municipal culture centers is actually actual organizing space for meeting them, and ongoing cooperation, networking, and meeting, and actually sending newsletters, replying to calls, and so on. And the second part of how I see international cooperation as very crucial is advocacy. Advocacy, because culture is not only artistic and performative activity, culture is also the policy level. And I think that's how we're getting engaged into this, although we are regional institution, because the needs are there at the municipal level. So if you want to even change or adjust something in how the cultural institutions work or how the conditions of the local artists are, we need to talk to national level and we need to talk to international level. That's why we got interested in what's going on at the international level as well. So by advocacy, we are getting engaged in big European networks like this Culture Action Europe network, which I think is already 8 years that we are part of. We also are very interested in ENCC network, it's the Open Network of Culture Centers. We are part of Interpret Europe network, which is the network for interpretation of cultural heritage, because our role is also that we are experts on that, and we provide training to museums and cultural heritage sites how to talk about heritage. And if we want to make a change, I think it's the only way is to build coalitions and to build networking. And despite the different backlashes or minor negative or the need for still to build a narrative for culture, I consider this event that happened in Brussels a success because for a long time culture wasn't present of part of the discussion and wasn't sitting at the table. Now it's a little bit closer. Maybe next step is to really impact on narrative and support the way that the narrative is being developed. I think that's the only way that we can change things. It has to be done step by step. I also had a thought when you were talking before that actually there is an issue. It happens in every sector. A part of the culture sector, I experienced this as well in the environmental sustainability sector when I used to work, that there are different groups and they want to put forward their own ideas. And it's really difficult because there is so many groups. There are so many groups. And even at national level, we have many coalitions, many NGOs that are trying to put to the politicians their positions. The best idea, or maybe ideal word, would be that everyone sits together and agree one position, but it's not necessarily possible. But at least I think it's good to see what's going on. I think it's also good to agree that there are different groups, and then accept that there is some kind of competitiveness as well in this advocacy field, and try maybe to join those who also make already some progress instead of actually just trying to do that again. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to share at the moment. Thank you.
So the big question here would be whether the membership fee is worth being paid. The question that is bouncing back many times, every time when we are trying to join the international network or some kind of coalition, it comes with a cost. And then the question is how to assess evaluate the feedback that it comes from that. But jokes aside, actually the perspective of the neighboring country, the country with such a rich but also complex history in a very complex region. Robert, floor is yours, but only 5 minutes.
Well, that's easy because so many important things were already said, and I was all the time changing what I'm going to say. So in 5 minutes, what was not said is more than enough. Well, I think that when we speak about the culture on the local level, on a municipal level, it's important to come back to the very reason why culture is important. And this is because culture is having a democratic capacity in itself. So whenever we are having a democratic challenge, who is on the barricades in the avant-garde? It's always the cultural people, artists, because they have a big creative and then, of course, democratic potential. And then we thank that they are so critical people that can, examine. And I think that the worst thing that can happen to the culture is the scrutinization, the routinization of culture, when it becomes too obvious, too normal, and too very much ongoing and developed. And that's why I think it's very great that the culture and the role of culture is always challenged. But I think it's very important that we in culture shouldn't end up in then again departmentalization and this complaint logic. So nobody likes us, we don't have narrative and things like that. But let's just think how can we be creative. In this regard, culture, even on the local level, it has great potential. Of course, what we have to fight against is to avoid the unequal or paternalistic structures in the culture itself. So either it would be Brussels, either it would be eventually Warsaw. There shouldn't be a big unequal share of the resources. In this aspect, let's say I come from country and regions when we have the concentration of the power on the national level, because then culture is so much important for the national identity, which is meat. It is just a meat that is supporting this investment in the national sector. Because of that, so the municipal and the local culture is in a way double unprivileged because they don't have resources, and then there is a power center against which they always have to prove themselves. But because of that, I believe that it's very important that culture is always developed, and this cultural decentralization should be a real decentralization, which means also sharing of resources and fiscal power as well. And I think that at this moment, as Mr. Włodarski so beautifully expressed, municipalities, when they do have resources, they can easily come to strategies, to membership, to actions. But if you have limited resources and then limited mandate, it's always very hard to make it happen. And let's say in these countries, it happens that now, let's say, this great cultural program of European Capital of Cultures, if you don't provide enough resources, they're always dependent from international or national funding, and then they have different challenges. But on the other side, international cooperation, then it becomes like a tool for survival, so to say. It's a very pragmatic tool, because then if you don't have your own resources, you are getting into partnerships, and that's how you become strong. So in this regards, we have even very small municipalities in our country, especially in the border region, and then don't have much know-how how to enter the international cooperation, but there are enough programs offering this. So there is this Interreg, there is this pre-accession instrument, so that there is always resources and know-how in the partnership form that they are able to do. So that these are great examples why we need. Of course, we need the local culture, because the democracy, it happens on a very grassroots level, and then municipalities and communities are the places where we can have the culture working closer to the people and the citizens. And that is why it's important that the local culture is a bit self-centered. If you have local people and communities obsessed with the national myths, then they don't recognize their neighbor. Because of that, let's say we have the capitals or even the cities who are actually diversity, they are mixed, they are ethnically mixed, culturally mixed, but then they are divided. Why they are divided? Because each of these communities are too much oppressed, I would say, by the following of the national myth. So that was the key to, let's say, Skopje vision for becoming capital of culture. It was culture above division. But then because Skopje, however capital, does not have enough resources, now this initiative is not working, because the national power battles also reflect the local culture. I still believe that on that, the real enemy of the city are not the neighborhoods and the mixed areas, but it's really the national power structures, and I would say even the national government, because of their obsession with this national identity, homogeneity, and things like that. And in this regard, I would remind also on the importance of the work of Council of Europe, and UNESCO as well, but especially Council of Europe is a good example with the intercultural city networks, and all they have done with the importance of intercultural competence. So if we live in a globalized society, intercultural competencies are the key competencies if we want to interfere into cooperation. Well, on that regard, I would admire and I would praise Poland, not because you are a good host, but let's say, and now Poland is becoming like an example for the anti-diversity movement, but Poland is not their best image, because Poland showed that they have democratic capacity, that they have intercultural background, and then intercultural response, let's say, to this big crisis with the Ukrainian refugees. And why is that? Because there is intercultural competence even on the city level, and you show us yesterday that this is happening in Krakow, it's happening in Warsaw, it's happening in Lublin, so that this is something we should strive for. And another point to end, again referring to the Council of Europe, is what you actually said. Some of you said that what they call this multi-level governance. So how to avoid this fight among the departments and different level of rule? It is by fostering this multi-level governance. So if we have the citizens involved through participatory practices, if we have thematic alliances, then we can better progress with our agendas. So the city, the municipality, or even the national government or the national ministry agency cannot solve the question unless they really make a huge coalition and then strengthening again themselves by this multi-level participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting, not only because it was intertangling many aspects and layers, but also because of the role, but also the challenges that are posed by this beautiful European top to bottom ideas like the European Capital of Culture. Let's start a short round of comments or questions. We had 3 perspectives: city, municipality, region, and the mixed region, non-European Union membership perspective. Any comments ad vocems? Luis, go ahead.
I do have 2 short comments. The first one is about the importance of the local coalitions. So I will just give you some examples from my side of Europe. So is the examples of different municipalities sharing in a network their international capacities, because isolated by themselves are too small, they don't have enough resources, but in coalition with others, they can be part of European project, they can develop international, and they can really do that. So I have the example, for instance, of the transversal network. It's a network of 10 cities outside Barcelona in Catalonia. There is Art and Rede in Portugal, Occitanie en Seine in the south of France. So this is very important, because when the municipalities agree to do something at the international level, it's quite easy to get money from the region or from the state, because and this is what you just said, no? This multi-level alliance. And the importance of pushing active participation at international networks, because it's not just to go there, it's to have participation capacity, because international affairs is, as I said before, is long-term impact activity. So you need to be today generous in order to get results later. My second comment is a little more critical, which is the center-periphery approach. Why we do from the local level, from the regional level, what we push international relations to just exchange using the traditional flows. So we want to do things with Germany, with the UK, with France, the stronger, powerful partners, or we want as well to do activities with Africa, with the eastern border, with Georgia, all the Caucasus and so on. Do we want to do that? And I think this is very important, because artists, even ourselves, we want to do things with important people. And this is sometimes a mistake. And I think we have now a opportunity, and I'm now linking to what Frederick said before. I think I disagree a little bit with Bartos in this specific point. I think this is the moment to take advantage of the current difficult situation. So just because some countries don't believe on soft power, if we believe in soft power, there is an opportunity. But we have to do that in a very smart way, having a lot of respect of the others, being in an equal position, and understanding that we have, as a continent, not maybe as a single countries, a post-colonial or a colonial past. So we are looked as former colonialists. So we have to be able to do that in a very precise way. And that is, but for doing that, we have to change our mind. Not trying to work only with the center people, but understanding that working with the peripheries, we can learn a lot and we can exchange a lot. But that means a huge change of mentality.
Bartosz?
To oczywiście jest wielkie wyzwanie.
Of course, this is a huge challenge. Well, I have chosen the periphery to make mainstream more credible. This is what it looks like. To give mainstream this kind of energy that, you know, is locked in very many mainstream activities. But of course, the situation is difficult to change. Everybody wishes to be there where the stars shine the most. And when you think about this circulation of culture in Europe, the festivals and so on, it is self-preferent, you know, it focuses on different careers. Everybody wishes to be in Avignon, but I prefer to go to China with my performance. Seriously, I believe that this way I can do more and achieve more than if I go to the Avignon festival. So I believe it's difficult to make this division here, because on the one hand, there's this pression and the dominant model that people strive for. And this means that this process of change is very long, because perhaps you also need to change priorities and also change the accompanying programs. This is something that can't change overnight. Thank you very much. Louis, in his comment, spoke about changing perspective, changing attitudes, changing the mindset. And it seems that one of the greatest successes of Europe project, the Erasmus and also Erasmus Plus project, that made students free themselves from the supervision of their professors, parents, and so on, well, has been very successful. But university is an international space, right? And therefore, it gives us very many opportunities. This is what I believe, at least. And therefore, let me move on now to Professor Jarosław Górniak, Vice Rector for International Cooperation at the Jagiellonian University. And let me ask him about ecosystems. So the environment where this intercultural cooperation and projects can take place, because they don't take place in void. You know, this space is also taken up in some part by universities. Okay, it's a very broad topic. Indeed, I represent quite an unique university, Jagiellonian University, and it's an artifact of culture per se. It is the carrier of legacy and the guardian of heritage. And if you have deep roots, then you can use your heritage. So this heritage has to be there, and yes, our university has its heritage. Universities are full of heritage. Now, our university has its own museum, and this is where you can see how science has developed. Because after all, science is part of culture. It's an area of creation and creativity. So science fulfills all the criteria of being part of artistic culture, because it also gives fun and entertainment to those who pursue science. I hope this is true about students as well. because I believe, there's nothing better than jumping out of your bathtub screaming out, Eureka! So this is something we draw on, and we look after our heritage, and we try to do it as part of our international cooperation. We do it as part of our Impulse project, that's part of Horizon program. And we are the leader of this project. We have 11 countries in this project, and we work on this immersive digitalization of cultural artifacts that we have in our deposit. Now, the museum is of course a museum, but if you think about a university archive, well, after all, it's a treasure trove of heritage. This is where you can find information on histories, on biographies of people who were the cornerstones of culture. Now, universities are also involved in humanities, in social sciences, where artistic endeavors and products of arts are studied. Now, every international contact, and our university has very many of them, serves intercultural exchange. Currently, we have 276 bilateral agreements with universities from 76 countries. So it's this dry number that speaks about the scale of what we're doing in the context of this discussion on intercultural exchange and collaboration. Now, when I met Robert Alagisowski, we exchanged remarks on collaboration between our university and the University of Cyril and Methody in Skopje, and also on wine culture in Macedonia, because we both know this best Macedonian vineyard. And I would have any knowledge of this place had I not been invited to Skopje once as part of intercultural cooperation. Well, what I've been saying here has been quite obvious. So the benefits of Erasmus and Erasmus Plus are obvious. And yes, we are part of international networks, including Alliance, that gathers 11 universities, 9 come from European member states, the remaining 2 are from Europe. And here we have very intense collaboration. Here we have joint university courses. So these are European studies, and also studies on sustainable development. So there will be 6 universities giving to students 1 diploma. The countries that are not part of the EU, unfortunately, cannot issue this diploma jointly with us. It's the matter of the law. And I'd like the EU to do something about it, no by the end of 2030, but by the end of 2028 at the latest, perhaps 2027, because we really need to have this joint EU diploma. Now let me tackle on one more issue. Now, the title of our panel focuses on thinking about culture in this international perspective. So we have to think here about something that is related to ethnicality, but also something that's interpolitical. So when you think about culture, we and international collaboration, we always focus on territorial communities related to language or politics. But if you think about the environment, such as the scientific environment, what we do as part of our international collaboration is done not in our languages, native languages, but we use English language as lingua franca, and we also use our this very hermetic language of science that is hardly understandable to people who are outside of this scientific environment. So we have our own standards, we have the ways we behave, our code of conduct, let me call it this way. We also have our dress code. We really know what to put on when we go to a scientific conference. We know that we can wear jeans and trainers, right? Yes, as opposed to chess tournaments. Okay, I'm not going to talk about it in detail. Why am I speaking about this? Well, because you could say that it's a form of culture, if you think about it from this anthropological perspective. Now, you've been speaking here about artists and saying that they should reach out to peripheries. I would say the following. I believe that if classical musicians meet from very many different countries, then they will communicate very easily without even using words, but just by playing instruments. They will reach conclusions and agreements very quickly. But of course, the agreements have to be struck by the institutions that are not native institutions. So very often culture competes against funding or spending on tanks or on underground that should be built in Kraków. Well, yes, it should be built in Kraków. Why? Because hopefully we won't be forced to do it, but we need to have a place where we will be able to hide ourselves or to hide our heritage. I'm just referring to what is happening in Kyiv right now. So an underground is important not just from the perspective of communication or transportation, but from the perspective of safety. But yes, we compete against others, and if we want to win, we have to be able to be in contact with the cultures that maybe are not native to us, but that we need to try and understand. I don't want to risk saying here something that could be very easily criticized. Those who become stars, they become stars because they can enter into dialogues more easily, and then they don't need to ask politicians to give them a helping hand. Thank you very much, Director. Time is flying, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, and therefore let me now ask our audience to ask questions, to make comments. We have here many cultural practitioners, directors of cultural institutions with great experience. Our apologies for this setting, that we are actually sitting with our backs to you, but we do count on your opinions and comments and questions to our experts.
We do need a microphone because there is interpretation. I am, first of all, a practitioner. and I've organized the Street Theatre Festival. I also run a theatre. We've been abroad more than 500 times, 800 cities on all the continents. But first of all, I'm a practitioner. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll be quite trivial. I invited foreign companies in the past, 80s, 90s. I had the best French and German shows. They only asked about the place to perform, accommodation and hotel food, and then they paid for everything. Then the festivals get in and they did it. They paid for everything. Governments of EU states are quite uneager to pay for travel costs. And these are high costs because there are decorations. But we don't have those cases from Asia. Sometimes there are Korean, sometimes Japanese companies, and they are joyful to promote themselves in Europe. These are macroscopic mechanisms. We can discuss them. Now I had that interesting tour of Asia and we discussed different things. And now that brought to my mind that EU joke. There's that EU joke. What does EU sometimes deal with? When they build bridges in China, and these are 5-level bridges, the EU has a case of how to connect the top to a bottle. And of course, that makes everyone irritated. We need such reflection as well, but we must consider how to function together in this state. Because I really feel, I don't like the word discomfort, because certain mechanisms have degenerated. They are no longer fresh. Cultural exchange goes on at various levels. But I participate in many projects at the level of a city, but also at the central level. I've been with the Royal Opera in Norway, and this is no kid game. Things in the past were fascinating and interesting, and now it has become pedestrian. Well, I'm missing the word difficult. It's really quite discouraging, so I very often stop applying. If I were to write 50 pages of TypeScript and somebody tells me in the third line on your 25th page you made a formal mistake, I'm discouraged because this is spending all our energy for nothing. I just wanted to ask a question because I don't know an answer to it. Thank you very much, Director. Can I, Dominika? Professor? Bożena Gierat-Bieroń, the Jagiellonian University. Thank you. Bartosz said that the realm of art is the realm of emotions, so perhaps I will try to hush down those emotions and say something less emotional. I'll be defending the EU a bit, even if Director Zoin no longer wants to participate in the project. But I just want to say one thing. Namely, I've researched this issue for quite a long time. I research participation of cultural institutions in those. And as you know, there's not much money for culture, but it's there. It's always the same. Maybe there should be more of it, but it's not being lost. This is a constant form of aid. It goes to the cultural sector as part of specific programs. As you know, the EU offers it, and you have that consistency here, because consistency is very important in the EU, consistency between programs. So it exists in EU. Projects in EU are first of all focused on integration. They are about culture, but the goal is to emphasize European goals and integration. That's what you discussed, cooperation. That results directly from the treatises. And this is being implemented. Now, the weakness of culture, this is really broad brush painting, researching the culture of EU. I have to say that the cultural policy of EU is weak, and it goes without saying. Why? Because it was ensconced in the treatises, and that's what the member states agreed to. They agreed because the governments agreed, so it's not the fault of the EU. And I still see that people say that it is a fault. Okay, perhaps now in the negotiations between the Parliament, Commission and the Council, they may make a mistake, but please be informed that the Commission always wants to cut down the spending for culture, and the Parliament wants to elevate it. But please remember that competences in culture were sent to Brussels. We are living in a specific political system, and what can we do? First, we can elect politicians who will go to the European Parliament, who will have culture at the heart. Well, I don't remember any politicians speaking about culture there. In the programs of the parliamentarians who go for it, they don't discuss culture at all. I don't know if they know that there is this sector, and then they just get to this commission, the committee in the parliament, and they just don't even know how to tackle it because there was no place in any other committee. If we want to have more money in the union, what you gentlemen said about advocacy, lobbying and all that, we have to first of all change the political thinking. As Olga said, these are the policy makers. And if we want more money, have a more empathetic approach to cultural sector, more differentiated and rising and not diminishing amount of funds and interest of people in this sector, well, we've got to get politicians into that. No other way out. We've got to appoint those politicians and remember that they must get that money. They, first of all, have to understand the cultural policy of the EU. They must know it. And there are politicians who don't even know when the Treaty of Lisbon was signed or when Euro was introduced. Prime Minister Szydło didn't know it. The knowledge of those politicians is absolutely low. And now just think that they are supposed to be efficient later on during their work. Thank you very much. I'd like to say short ad vocem what Professor Gerard Bierań says is super important. One perspective is missing. Not that the professor forgot it, but I will just complement it. How about asking ourselves a question whether a parliamentarian, an MEP who is now a member of the parliament, do we all who have something to say about culture, have we emailed them saying, now it's a key moment in Europe, we've got our commissioner, he is the budgetary commissioner, he will have a colossally important role in preparing the long-term financial framework. Email addresses of MEPs are not a secret. You can write an email to everyone. If there is no such grassroots awake, and if there is no this bottom-up voice, the politicians won't wake up themselves and won't fight for culture because there is no direct translation. Even if they were going to the parliament with a slogan "Culture Matters," they won't be able to prove to their electors that they brought something during their term. So stuck in this incessant campaign whirlwind, you're either in a campaign or the campaign has just finished and you need to show proofs and another campaign's coming. Just remember, it's not true only about Poland. In Poland, we see it really in a very clear and drastic manner. The same politicians are always in the same elections. If you see how many politicians who got to the parliament in October 2023 ran for the European Parliament, they left their posts, and now they operate in the EU structures, the Minister of Culture, and so forth and so fifth. I just want to say that there is just one board and the pawns jump from one field to another. We have mechanisms of reaching those people. Let's talk to them, because only then would they understand that this is important for the people who elected them and that it must be part of the agenda. So let's now make a short soul searching. Have you talked to the parliamentarian in your constituency? Thank you very much. The last voice from the floor. Here you are. Good afternoon. I wanted to present the voice of the youth. I'm a student of the Jagiellonian University, and I would like to touch upon the question that can encourage reflection or perhaps give you a rhetorical question. For several years, I've been active in various youth organizations in youth politics, and I'd like to note that for several years we have seen a growing tendency for noticing the voice of the young people, but unfortunately it doesn't look the way we would all like it to look. I'll be developing it slowly to show you how important that is. People listen to that voice, but they don't listen out, they don't hear it out. And I want to say that as soon as we want to make changes, they won't happen now. We've got to think about it in a bit long-term framework. And perhaps we should make a reference to culture here. We should change the way of education. We should pay attention to young people, not only to emphasizing their development on the cultural plane. Perhaps we should encourage young people to implement their ideas, how to train, how to share the value of that culture. Because, as I said before, what we introducing now, the changes we're introducing now, they'll be seen in several years. So, with all due respect, but every generation has its key values, so perhaps we should change this thinking a bit and start approaching this subject a bit differently.
Mamy jeszcze jeden głos, Dawid.
We have one more speaker, David.
Conscious of the time, so I'll try to be quick. I'm David McGurr. I'm here wearing probably 2 or 3 hats today. I have to warn you, I'm not known to be quick or short when I speak. I am a community activist. I'm very active within the international community here in Krakow, and for that I'm one of the multicultural ambassadors. I also work with the Scottish Government on their Poland team, helping to integrate the 2 governments on government policy, but also on culture. But I'm also here, importantly, to be inspired, to learn, and to develop our own ideas. Myself and Lindsay, who's also in the audience, I'm casting my net. I'm in my comfort zone within the international community in Krakow, in that I am well connected, I have a strong network, and I have been part of Otwarte Krakow. I am involved in a new initiative, which is truly an international cultural initiative. So I'm having to dig deeper and explore new territory, new connections. So I've come here really to try to understand what the current thinking is, what the policy is, what the challenges are, and to direct and influence what we're planning to do with our Krakow Celtic Festival, which is truly international. We have 7 Celtic nations, and Krakow used to be a Celtic region. And I will be trying, one of the problems that I've found, I was a researcher by profession, and I am well connected and I understand the systems here. I have still found it challenging to access and to get to the right place, to be signposted, to reach the right department, to get guidance, to get inspiration, influence, advice, and some assistance in what we're trying to achieve. So it was really just to say this has been really helped to open my mind and inspire us with what we plan to do, to say thank you for the invitation, and I do hope that I can speak to some people at the kind of social part or the downtime after the official part and introduce our festival. Thank you.
Proszę Państwa, no nie wiem jak to powiedzieć inaczej, więc
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how can I say it differently. We've got to be finishing. Well, my head is full of quite a long list of the threads that have been taken up, questions I'd like to ask, to draw from your rich, lavish experience. So I believe that this sustainability dimension of our project will be the fact that this is not the last discussion. Thank you very much for participation. I'd like to thank our online participants who are listening to this cast, to listen to this discussion that I believe has been very important and now at its end. I believe it could be interesting. Thank you for finding time in your very busy schedules. The fact that at the table here in the villa we've got representatives of central units, the best universities, municipalities, international and regional organizations is also a proof of solidarity of this environment in which we will be able to count on good results of international work. All I have is to now left to invite you to the meeting place known as Villa Decius. Thank you very much.